The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Everybody has their own story and their own journey to share. Every journey conceals another journey within its lines, the path not taken and the forgotten angle. Listen to the stories from others sharing their triumphs and struggles that led them to where they are today. Welcome to Voice Unbound, where we bring women on to use their voice and tell their story. So many times women go through changes and seasons, and at some point we start losing our voice. We feel like we've been silenced and we can't talk about things. Maybe we're shameful or maybe we're embarrassed. But here on Voice Unbound, I bring women in to share their story and their full story, not just parts. So today I have Anna. Is it Anna or Annie? I knew I was going to
It's
probably say
it's
it.
Anne.
Anne. Okay, well, you
Uh-huh.
got the E on. So,
Yeah.
I want to make it Annie. So, welcome, Anne. I'm so glad to have you on my show today. Let's just get started and let's tell our audience about you.
Well, I can start from the very beginning. Might be the
Yes,
best place to start
it
because that
usually is.
yeah, because it's where it kinda started with me.
Mm,
Growing up, I had parents, they took me to church, um, and that was all well and good, but there was a distance. I felt there was a distance in the relationship, as a child you get envious when or jealous, when you see your friends and their parents interacting in one way, and you're like, why can't that be the same with mine?
mm,
And that's kind of where it's not that my parents didn't love me, but I was wishing and I wanted something so much more.
mm,
And that's where some of my some of my negative thoughts are coming into people pleasing and like probably in my teenage years started. I was saved, I would say, at the age of 12,
mm,
but my mother was one of these that you didn't really talk about those type of things, even
mm.
though we went to church. It's just it was just I think it was when they were raised. My father was in World War II, so that gives you kind of a maybe where that generation was, it was a tough those were tough years, I know for them. And so, because they were separated after they were married
Yeah.
for probably 2.5 years.
Wow.
And so I can see where there could be a little bit of that. But going back, my mother, on that day, I can remember sitting with our senior pastor. But my mother said, I think it's time for you to go and talk to the pastor. Not
Mm,
really the reason why.
yeah.
Basically, she said was, I think it's time for you to join the church.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
Because I was raised Baptist, and to be a
Right.
member of the church, you had to talk to them, to the
Yes.
pastor,
Yes.
and then accept Jesus and then be baptized before you could fully take communion.
Right.
So I went in there kind of thinking that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And so, but it took me two times to talk with him
Mm,
to actually even understand, even at that young age, which we don't grasp the whole meaning of it.
right.
But it took that many times for me to even grab onto the concept that Jesus was God's son and that he loved me and that I didn't fully understand. Even then, I don't think the full pardoning of our sins.
Mm,
We were truly
mm,
forgiven.
right.
I still bought into the idea, I think, that I had to earn it.
Ah, yeah,
I
because you
still
were trying so hard to earn the love and the time with your parents, so you thought, "Well, I gotta do that with him too."
Yeah, and that's, I think, had something to do where I progressed into people pleasing,
Mhm.
which is and perfectionism.
Mm.
Because my mother, I took piano.
Mm.
I think I always wanted to play the acoustic guitar, which that'll happen a lot
You still
later
gonna do
on.
that, right?
Right. And I was always in choir, so that's growing up and even not as much now, but through the years I was. so music was also
Part of your life.
a part of my life, and it was essential to worship, but also outside of it.
Mhm.
And so I kind of gave in. I took piano for 10 years,
Wow, that's a
and
long
it's one.
time to stick with it.
Well, my mother, her favorite phrase was practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And I don't really buy into that phrase
Right?
because none of us are perfect until we
Right.
stand before Jesus face to face.
Amen.
But I went on and did it, and I'm glad I did. But the thing about getting back to that, that phrase, I always felt like I had to do things perfect. I
Mhm.
always felt because I wanted things a certain way with my parents because I visioned it.
Mhm.
I bought into the lie that I self-manipulated, that because they couldn't verbally tell me that they loved me, that they
Mhm.
didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Short and simple, I bought into that lie that
I'm
Satan
not
wanted me.
loved. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And therefore, when you do that, you start feeling unworthy, unloved, unappreciated,
Mhm.
that you're not good enough, and you
Right.
never will be. And again, I did that, but there were also good times because the good outweighed the people pleasing, even through the years.
That's good. That's good.
But I never got really to the root of that issue until many, many years later because I put it on the back burner.
Right?
I said, you know,
That's not a
okay,
problem.
I feel
Yeah.
good now.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do that, because so many things happen in our childhood days. With all that's just growing up parts. We can get rid of that, not worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
Because look how good things are now. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, that's still down in there.
It is down there. And I do believe, like it happened with me much later, that God will keep bringing that up occasionally, and that kept when I would backslide over the period during, we all backslide, we're
Right.
sinners
Right.
and fall
Right.
short of the glory of
We're
God,
human.
but yeah, but he will bring it up, and each time it kind of gets a little bit more intense.
Mm.
I have found that until there comes a day when you just flat out can't ignore it anymore.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
if you don't, it's going to eat you alive. And that's one of my pastor. He preached a sermon not too long ago on forgiveness.
Yeah.
And he said, if you don't, any kind of sin of unforgiveness that you put off, it's going to eventually eat you alive
Eat
if
you
you
alive. Yeah.
don't.
It does.
It
And it comes
really.
up in the weirdest times too, because I've seen that and felt that and been there.
Mhm.
And just you're like, where did that come from? I was
Yeah.
what?
It's
Yeah.
like, I don't remember that, but when God knows when you're ready and he
Mm-hmm.
knows you better than you know yourself. But over the years, I would say from that day, when I was 12 and growing through, I will say at least I always had the faith because my
Mm-hmm.
faith would be stronger as I grew.
Mm-hmm.
In college, I sort of had some rebellious years.
Yeah.
None of them too bad or anything. At least I
Yeah.
stayed out of trouble.
Yeah. 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 He knew, but
But
nobody else did.
right,
Yeah.
right. Um, but then after college, after I finally moved to Charlotte, and now I live in Concord, but which is outside of Charlotte. But when I
Mm-hmm.
moved there, became on my I got on my own, I did get into a church community,
Mm-hmm.
and I could feel my faith growing within the
Mm-hmm.
singles community.
Mm-hmm.
I could I felt the strength and everything, but then there was still that at
Mm-hmm.
sometimes those backslidden times where you still felt like you needed to seek other people's validation and
Mm-hmm.
not from God.
Mm-hmm.
And that still held true even through those years as I transitioned from one church maybe to another or from one job to another.
Mm-hmm.
Because there have been many times, even through the job and through the change from one job to another. And I think about that. And there was one instance in when I was working in back in 1991. Been an accountant for so many years
Yeah.
and in different industries, of course.
Right. Right.
This one particular job, this is how faithful God is. And it was very trying. I was laid off just because there was reorganization.
Mm.
And there were 12 business schools within this one corporate head that were owned
Mm-hmm.
by the corporate headquarters. Well, all 12 of the bookkeepers or accountants got laid off because they were
Mm.
centralizing everything over to the corporate headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was Halloween that year,
Oh no.
1991,
Mm.
and I was laid off. And at the end of the severance pay, three months later, that very morning, I had a job interview. That very afternoon, I was called back in for the second interview, and my money was running out, but I was
Mm-hmm.
offered the job and I started on Monday.
Wow.
Now that is God,
Yeah.
and he gave me the money by the severance pay, and
Mm-hmm.
with that severance, I had insurance during that time.
Yeah, that's good.
So when you think about it, God has done that time after time.
Mm-hmm.
That is just one of the
One
many.
one time. Yeah.
Yeah, of the many. And but I could still see the old thing about wanting to seek the validation. I had
Mm-hmm.
two prayers, especially with my mother. Um, it's not that we didn't have a good relationship. We did.
Yeah.
And I know without a doubt that both of my parents loved me.
Loved you. Yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 instances with both of them that I
Yeah.
could see it,
Yeah.
and it's almost right before they both passed.
Right.
And sometimes it might take you a lifetime for prayers to
Exactly.
be answered.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this I think it helped me, with my father. Um, he's one my mother would never be able to teach me how to drive.
Oh,
She's she
yeah.
would not have
No
the
nerves for
patience.
that.
She's the backseat driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my father was the one who had patience, and I saw that when he taught me how to drive.
Oh, cool.
And I saw that in him, but still, he had his own accounting practice, so he would
Yeah.
work so many long hours.
Mm.
And because he worked, I was jealous because of that time I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
with him because when
Mm-hmm.
he came home, he was tired. He went right
Tired.
straight to bed.
Yeah.
So, and my mother kind of took up the slack as best as she could.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you miss that and you don't feel it, it kind of
It,
hurts.
yeah, and it carries through into
It
your,
does carry through into your other relationships
yeah.
if you don't, because I was kind of an introvert. A lot of people would say, can't ever see you as being an introvert. But I said, I was because of the insecurity of not being able to hear those words or just feeling that they could show it.
I think I like to call it surface living. You were living on the surface, but you weren't showing your true feelings, your true heartache, your true things that you were going through. That's why everybody thought you were okay. No, you
Yeah.
weren't an introvert. They thought, oh no, how could you be that? Because you were surface living.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't living the way that I know that God really wanted me to or the way I should because I was seeking other people's approval, my parents' approval, getting their appreciation
Mm-hmm.
and striving for perfectionism because really all I really wanted to hear him say is, "And just do your best and we will love you and appreciate you. Just do that and
We're good.
that's all you need to
Yeah.
do."
Yeah.
But I don't recall a time hearing that.
Yeah.
I may be wrong on that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you choose to remember
You
what you
do.
remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's part of the lies
Unfortunately. Yeah.
that's part of the lies from
Mm-hmm.
Satan.
Mm-hmm.
But, progressing on, through the years, I would say the biggest one of the changes, it wasn't, I won't say the most monumental, but it was one of the changes that was going forward. And that was
Mm,
in late 2019. Um, you know, I think I had gone through this was sometimes when the backslidden days
mhm,
would get a little bit longer, or the
mhm,
time of spirit, it could be days, it could be weeks. This one lasted about 8 or 9 months.
mm,
And so I knew there was something because I stopped going to church. I stopped reading the
yeah,
Bible. Um, I didn't have my quiet time anymore. I
mm,
became the couch potato and looked at TV even when there was nothing really
yeah,
suitable for me to watch.
yeah,
Or I just kind of just slept.
yeah,
And if you stay that way, and if you stay in that way, I've learned that's when what I'm saying it's going to eat you alive. It's going to affect you
mhm.
mentally, physically, or what have you.
And that's when Satan can get you more and more. He takes you more. I mean,
Oh,
you're opening it up for him to just grab hold of you.
yeah.
Also, though, I would say Jesus brings you to your knees, and that's where he meets you.
Yep. It's usually when you get to that point because I could go downhill physically.
Mhm,
I was to that breaking point
mhm,
because I was pre-diabetic
mm.
and my mother was type 2, so I knew I ran
It was in
a
the
high
family.
risk of it.
Mhm,
But I was on no medication. I was in pretty good physical health considering.
mhm,
Um, but I actually, and I really haven't talked a lot about this and probably should, and I'll just mention it. I don't know if I would have ever carried it out because I probably, but I did say, when you live by yourself like myself,
mhm.
you talk to the four walls, they become
Yes.
friends.
Yes, they do.
And I just said one day I said the word suicide.
Mm.
And that was my wake up call. I don't think I would have had the guts to carry it out,
But that feeling was there.
but the feeling was there. And when you say the word, you can't deny it.
Yeah.
And that was my wake up call. And I think it was the beginning of God and showing me that, Anne, you've got to stop doing this people pleasing. You've got to stop trying to be perfect. You
Mm.
can't. People
Mm-mm.
are we have control of our behavior, our actions, what we say. We
Mhm.
don't have control over certain things, but like we can't control another person's
No.
reactions. So I finally began, I think, to learn what it was. I understood that I was the root of my problem,
Mhm.
not my parents.
No.
I
We
was
create
letting,
our circumstances.
yes, I did.
Mhm.
And, but to do that, I felt like I knew that I needed somehow to gain my parents' approval. Even before that, just to back, just to go back just a little bit. My father passed away in 1994.
Mm.
My parents they went on a trip of a lifetime over to England and the UK.
Oh, wow.
But towards the end, the last leg of the trip, my father got really, really ill.
Mm.
And over in England, UK, it is socialized
So
medicine.
different. Yeah.
It's different, but they will take you in if it's emergency. And with him,
Mhm.
it was. Long story short, they found out he had to have emergency surgery to take
Mm.
tumor out of his colon, and
Mm.
of course, it resulted in colon cancer, but he stayed over there in England for 5 weeks,
Oh, wow.
and then his organs started shutting down because he had complications from surgery.
Mm.
He was 77, but my mother did not want him to pass over there, so
Right.
the Swiss have these medvac planes, and so they got him back home.
Wow.
And within a week and a half, he passed
Mm.
away.
Mm.
But my prayer was for him. I hadn't seen him for 5 or 6 weeks. So my prayer
Yeah.
was if I could just see him and he couldn't talk, but if he could open his eyes and know
Mm.
where he was, because I
Mm.
know the hearing is one of the last things
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go.
He could still hear you.
But he actually opened his eyes for a couple of seconds,
Mm.
and I could see in those eyes,
He
um,
loved you.
yeah, he didn't ever have to say it. I
Mhm.
could just see it because his eyes were fixated on me, and I talked to him in a way that I knew he could hear me and
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
It was a few minutes, but that's what I got. And
That's
then,
what you needed.
mhm, and he passed in July of that year.
Mm.
But, and then my mother, the last three, and she passed away in January of '08. And the blessing was, even though it was one of the hardest times of my life,
Mm.
I was her caregiver for 3.5 years.
Yeah. That's hard.
And she had to move from my hometown to to where I live because I had a job, I had to work.
Mm.
So I know that that was hard on her, but it
Mhm.
also, even through the struggles, I cried out to God, I don't know how many times, but he carried me through it. I wish I had a group that I could have been a part of,
Yeah.
but there was not until towards the end.
Mhm.
And but I had two prayers with her, especially because I felt like there was a strained relationship. That was just how I felt with
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
My prayers were that I would hear her say that she loved me verbally and
Mm.
that she was saved.
Yeah.
Both of those prayers were answered within a week of
Oh,
one another and a
awesome.
month before she died.
Awesome.
So but even through all of that, I still would not get back to the root, and face up to
Mhm.
where the root of it was.
Mhm.
Not until 2019. And so since both of them had passed in 2019, I felt God said, and you need to go to the gravesite, even though their physical remains are there, they are with
Yeah.
Jesus. I know that
Yeah.
both of them confidently are.
Yeah.
And but I felt the need to do this
Mhm.
because it's just to be close, as close to them physically as I could.
Right. Right.
But
The last
then,
place you remember being there with them. Yeah.
yep. And so before I got on the road, which was about an hour drive from where I live,
Mm.
I saw a rainbow
Oh.
in the distance of the
Yeah.
very direction I was going.
Oh.
So that was comforting. I was luckily that I could pull over on this busy road and just take a quick shot, a
Yeah.
snapshot.
Yeah.
For some reason, it triggered me to do that. And so I proceeded on, and this is where the forgiveness started.
Mhm.
I had to ask God to forgive me for the resentments and bitterness
Mhm.
that I falsely brought up.
Yeah.
And then I also, where it's the hardest for any of us, is the guilt we put on ourselves.
Mhm.
But self forgiveness is so important. But you have
Yeah.
to ask God to enter in and help you to do that.
Yeah.
There's no other way, in my opinion, for it to work. And when both of those are taken care of, the last barrier is I just kind of looked up at the sky and I just said, Mom, Dad, God, I ask that you forgive me for holding these and for not being brave enough
About
to
it.
talk to
Yeah.
you about it.
Yeah.
And I felt a peace I hadn't felt in such a long time.
Mm.
I get a little
Yeah.
little emotional thinking
Well,
about it
that
at
that
times.
that that touched your heart because it was
Yeah,
real. It
yeah,
wasn't the surface stuff anymore. Now we're getting in the deep stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and it was just only the first, it was
The
only
beginning.
partial. And
Mhm.
I thought then it was both of them, but it was really my mother,
Mm.
and which was fine because that was one that I held more resentments
More.
against.
Yeah.
And from after that, I kind of just I was on the drive back home, and you know how we as humans, we love to see something tangible.
Yes.
It's like,
We look
God,
for them.
I
Yeah.
want to know that I'm truly forgiven.
Yeah.
If there's any way possible, can you do that? I pulled into my subdivision about 3 hours later and I stopped, tears just rolling down because I actually saw a rainbow over the entire subdivision with the center point where the arch is of the rainbow was like, from that point of view, it looked like it was right over my house.
Mhm.
And so of course, I took a picture of
Yes.
it because that is from God.
Oh, yeah.
Because I mean, he promised
That's
Noah
perfect timing.
In Genesis that he would never flood the earth again.
Mhm.
And that was the first rainbow that was in the Bible.
Mhm.
So that's God's promise.
Mhm.
And then, the COVID lockdowns and everything
Mhm.
hit the next couple of years. And during those years, I my faith started building, where some people's would, because they
Went
were
the other
locked
way.
down and not
Yeah.
being able to get out.
Depressed. Mhm.
Mine started building because I began to incorporate the quiet time back in.
Mhm.
Maybe not every day, but it was getting back
Mhm.
because it's not going to happen all at once.
No.
And I because I had found a church also in November where I'm still a member of, where God led me.
Mm.
And so I knew with that church, and they were really fundamentally, they had this, every Sunday you could watch it online.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And they were, and that's just how they are.
Mhm.
And there are the typical Bible preaching, teaching,
Mhm.
walking, whatever
Yeah.
church. And I was so thankful for that. I held on to that.
Mm.
And because I knew that well, I knew what the lies were. I had grasped and acknowledged the root of the
Mhm.
problem. And I had walked through part of the forgiveness.
Right.
You know, there were one other time that I had to really walk through it. But that at least gave me a starting point through those 2 years. And through those 2 years, I would work, remotely at home. I
Mhm.
couldn't go into the office, but it also gave me a time where God said, I've always had a love for nature, for horses and things like that.
Mhm.
So I latched on to the Canadian drama, Heartland.
Oh, yeah.
And I really liked the way they wrote the story more than
Mhm.
anything else. And one of the
Mhm.
characters, I liked the way they wrote because he came from being a juvenile delinquent to putting himself through medical school and then
Mm.
marrying one of the daughters
Yeah.
of Jack.
Yeah.
But the character's name was Ty Borden. He was played by Graham Wardle.
Mhm.
And I binge watched 13 or 14 seasons within two
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
But it was one of the better written shows, and I just liked the moral values of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so after Graham decided to leave the show, and this was towards about the end, I guess, of 2021,
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to see what he was all about.
Yeah.
So, not that I was a fan crazed or anything, I was just more curious.
Curious. Yeah.
Yep. And so I learned that he himself was a writer, he's a poet.
Mm.
He had his own podcast because Time Has Come. Even that Time Has Come captivated.
Yeah.
And so I took Time Has Come, I went to that, and I found out he had a community on Substack. And
Nice.
that's where my blog is now. But
Yeah.
for some reason, I could not understand, well, why would you want me to do this, God?
Mhm.
But I had progressed enough in my faith to know that this is something where God was leading me.
Mhm.
And because I just couldn't shake the idea, I really liked what Graham was all about. He's all about getting, listening to what you are supposed to be doing, what you're guided to be doing,
Mhm.
and get
Mhm.
out of your comfort zones.
Mhm.
Because I knew that's where God was
Leading
guiding
you.
me to do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, God, I'll join the community. I have no idea what I'm getting into.
Yep.
I found out a lot of the community, they were around my age.
Oh,
They were
nice.
all over the world because a lot of people know about the show,
Right.
Portland, but they also were Christians.
Mm.
And that helped me open up.
Mhm.
That helped me to be transparent.
We all
God,
need community.
yes. And it was the kind of community that I needed for me to open
Yeah,
up into.
like-minded people. Mhm.
Mhm. And not feel like you're going to be persecuted or
Yeah,
something like that. You,
yeah.
even though we might have a little bit of different beliefs, um, then, but we can come together and we learn to respect
Mhm.
one another and
Mhm.
accept one another's for who that person is. You meet them where
Right,
they are.
right.
So I joined, but he had a podcast in February of that year that really started the ball rolling forward. I mean, he has a friend called Don McLeod, and Donnie
Mhm.
Mac is what he goes by. He's a singer, songwriter, and actor, and has
Huh.
become a good friend of mine. I've
Oh,
met now
cool.
three
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
And the podcast, Donnie has just like this dynamic dynamic story of how
Mm,
he was saved.
mm,
And it just that listening to that podcast that night, it's like that is how my faith should be more of.
mhm.
And and I was in tears, and I'm like, I made a comment on Substack how much that affected me. And I thought, well, Graham, he may not read them. But
Yeah.
I woke up during the middle of the night and I saw like I had this email from Graham Wardle on Substack, and I'm like, he actually read it and liked my
Mhm.
comment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, he is for real.
Yeah,
He is
yeah,
genuine and
yeah.
he is. He's not your typical,
Right. Letting
actor.
somebody else look at his
Yeah.
stuff and answer it. Yeah, he answered it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did. And but Donnie, that just propelled me to even open up more in my faith.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, and also Graham being a writer and a poet, that opened me up to something that I hated growing up. I was a numbers girl,
Yeah.
but creative writing somehow.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I had a choice in like May or the 1st of June
Mhm.
to either, I felt more inclined to start a blog.
Mhm.
Um, but also there was another opportunity to because he was moving the network or his to Mighty Networks, another new
Mhm.
platform.
Mhm.
And I said, God, whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do your will.
Mm.
But if you want me to do the blog, I need a title for it.
Mm.
But I'll need to, but you know the circumstances. I can't wait for long,
Yeah, gotta do
but
this.
if
Yeah.
you pray like that, God knows the circumstance He's
He
gonna answer.
knows. Yeah.
So He spoke to me while I was brushing my teeth the next morning, one day at a time.
Yeah, I like that.
And that was that birthed the name of the blog. I knew that I was not supposed to be the other. And I'm glad because I had friends that said, well, why don't you try for that? And I'm like, I'll listen to you, but I have to listen to God first.
Right?
So that's kind of what I did. And it I went back from the time that in 2019 and came forward a little bit
Mhm. Mhm.
to bring people forward. And
Mhm.
now it's become more of devotional for
Yeah.
me sharing that.
Yeah.
But all of that said, it also brought in with Don, if that podcast brought in the love that I had for the acoustic guitar
Mm.
way back when I was a child.
Mhm.
And I'm like, God said you are never too old to learn
Mm-mm.
an instrument.
No.
So I I bought myself a guitar and
Love
I
it.
took some lessons for a while,
Mhm.
but then I felt like they were interfering with my job. So I'm like, I think I can teach myself at
Mhm.
whatever pace I'm supposed to learn
Right.
myself. So
Right.
that's what I've been doing ever since then.
Mhm.
But I met Donnie for the first time in June of 2022 and in Nashville,
Mhm.
Tennessee, because Nashville is one of my favorite places to
Oh,
visit.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Love
and
it there.
yeah, I do too. And I met him there, and that's where he introduced me about songwriting because I
Mm.
asked him about it.
Mm.
And now then the songs that I wrote, they have been part of the healing process. I now
Mhm.
really realize that
Mhm.
because I went back and wrote a song about my father, about that day when I saw him in the hospital,
Mhm.
and how it was before then.
Mhm.
I brought it into a song. And then I also wrote one about my mother, about,
Mhm.
about her.
Yeah.
And it was sweet. I wrote and about the answer to those two prayers.
Mhm.
And there were other songs because my one thing I've learned a whole lot better to do. I'm still will never be an expert at it because we're not perfect.
No, we're
Is to
learning.
wait on
Always
God's
learning.
timing.
Yes.
That is the
Yes.
hardest to do. But I've begun to bring and incorporate that into the blog and all that, and then the
Mhm.
writing. And then that brings me forward, I guess, to last year, 2023.
Yeah.
I knew that change, being an accountant, that change was happening within where I was working.
Mm.
You sense it, um, and there was a lot of stress that was building up for the first 4 or
Mm.
5 months because I felt like I might be called to step down or step
Mhm.
away, but
Mhm.
then the fear of the financial insecurity was like, God, you don't want me to do that yet. I'm not quite at retirement
Right, right.
age.
Not ready for that. Yeah.
I'm not, but he's like, you need to trust me.
Mm.
And I would, every time I would say, no, no, it would get a little bit more intense, just
Yeah.
like whatever you put off, it's gonna get a little bit more intense
Mhm.
till you cannot it gets so overwhelming, you can't ignore it.
Right, right.
And I think it finally hit when 2 of the people on we had different, divisions within
Mhm.
the company,
Mhm.
and so the division I worked in, 2 of the people gave their notices of
Oh,
the six-member team
oh.
within about 2 weeks of one another.
Mm.
So I knew
You
then
better make a move.
if I'm gonna make a move, God, whatever it is, you've got something for me.
Mhm.
So on my birthday in June of 2023, after my quiet time, I was in tears
Mm.
and I could feel the overwhelming sense to make that decision.
Mhm.
But once I said yes, then the inner peace came.
Mhm.
I knew it was right, even though there was that thing about the finance. I said, I can't, God, but I'm going
Yeah.
to go with this.
Yeah.
Well, 3 weeks later, I did start a contract perm position, but God allowed that to happen because He knew I actually had to go work for another company to say, Anne, it's not a mistake, but I know that's the only way you're going to know
Yeah.
because there was just things when I started and when from the interview until when I started, there were just
Mhm.
different things. And it was maybe 30 years ago, I could have put up with it,
Yeah, but not
but
now.
I would have
No.
not been able to
That
write.
starts changing as we get older and
Yes.
wiser.
And it's,
Yeah.
yeah. And I finally said, after 6.5 days, I knew that it wasn't going to be
That
right.
wasn't the thing you
So you
wanted.
can
Yeah.
leave within the contract part
Right.
and it's better.
Yeah.
And I said, there's not even there. I know accounting has been good to me for over 50 years. And I'm like, okay,
I'm
I'm going to
releasing
trust
it.
you.
Yeah.
But I had no idea where God would be really taking me, although
Right.
I knew had something to do with writing.
Yeah.
And so Proverbs 31 Ministries with Lisa Turkhurst is local,
Yeah.
and they had a She Speaks
I love
Writers
her.
Conference. Oh, I do too. And I've seen
Mhm.
her several times.
Mhm.
And I went, I've gone last year and I went this year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and one of the speakers in 2023 was Mary Morantz,
Mhm.
and she's a best-selling author, and she had, introduced a beta first-time writing course.
Oh, nice.
So I thought, first
Maybe I
time, the
should try
price
that.
I did.
Yeah.
I said, "You ought to try that so you can learn the entrepreneurship
Mhm.
what goes into a writer.
Mhm.
And I learned a lot of them were podcasters, speakers, coaches,
Right.
you know, because it's not just the book, it's not just the writing, it's
Right.
other things. And I took it and I learned. And when they mentioned the word coach, something clicked.
Mm.
But I do know that if I was working full or part time,
You
I
couldn't
couldn't
do that.
do what I was doing.
Mm-mm.
So God says, you're going to have to trust me to invest financially in your time.
Mhm.
I said, okay. So I did. And after just about finishing that course, I guess it would be about September, August, September, about this time
Mhm.
last year,
Mhm.
through Facebook Messenger, my cousin, who's like a sister to me, she sent me something, no explanation, but just this person's name. And if you click on it, then it would take you to their website. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, you never know, even if it's spam or not.
Right.
It took me several days to pray
To see
about
what
it.
it was. Yeah.
But God said, I want you to click on it. That's just kind of the feeling I
Mhm.
had. And I did. And that was Coach Francine Ivy. And she's based out of Dallas, Texas. And
Mhm.
she has her own company, an amazing story herself.
Mhm.
But I could tell this is where God wanted me to go. So I had a free strategy call with her.
Yeah.
I didn't I didn't jump on the first time because if you're gonna invest that kind
It's
of money
scary.
and time,
Mhm.
the money part, being the accountant, is
Yeah.
the scary part still to this
Yeah.
day. So after another strategy call with her about a month later, I just talked and we talked, and it's like, as long as I could do it one on one with her and not,
Mhm.
I felt better.
Mhm.
And so we did one on one, and in March I received my certification.
Awesome.
And she is the one who helped me figure out, it's like, well, what if I'm a coach? What is it going to be about?
Mhm.
And she mentioned, and you're called what they call a freedom coach. Your story is what you're going to coach others about.
Mhm.
And and she's also the one that says all your blog posts from a year and a half, bring them together and put them in a book and
Mm.
self-publish it on
Mhm.
Amazon. And when I went back and pulled everything together, by Graham being a poet, he introduced poetry to
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
And found I had a love for that.
Oh,
And so that's where I brought all the poem. I had enough, really, the poetry made more sense.
yeah.
And bringing that together with what the mindset part of my coaching is
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
about,
Mhm.
I I kind of pulled the all of that together, like in that kind of mindset. It's like gratitude is the first section. And if we
Mhm.
have that healthy and that good with that gratitude, the second section is mindset. It
Mm.
brings us to a healthy mindset. And the last section of the book is guidance.
Mm.
Because if we have both of those, we're going to be able to hear the whispers of the Holy Spirit
Mm.
to guide us so we can listen and be guided effectively.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the way I kind of think, about the coaching,
Mhm.
because I've undergone so much change. I've been pulled out of one comfort zone, out of another,
Mhm.
especially since 2022.
Mhm.
It started in 2019, but gradually
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
And so I've launched the coaching business, and basically my story is don't let whatever your people pleasing is not right. We're
Mm.
because we only validation we need to seek is from God,
Right.
because that is a false narrative. It's an imposter syndrome, and it's going to eat you alive.
It will.
And the sins
Mhm.
of unforgiveness leaves you disconnected from your faith with God.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I want to help people if they are stuck, if they want to let go of that fear and
Mm.
grab hold onto that faith that they've got,
Mhm.
and to renew their minds, walk
Mm.
through the forgiveness,
Right.
because you can't walk around it like I did for so many years.
No.
Because, and then you bring that through the change and transformation.
Mhm.
But you ask a question, what do you do with that? Well, your spiritual gifts, if depends on how much the dramatic the change is. Mine was my spiritual gifts changed.
Yeah.
So you just take a survey, and then we learn to write our testimonies. We learn to tell our stories
Mhm.
so we can have that ripple effect and further God's kingdom.
Oh, yeah.
And so we don't stay stuck. And
Yeah.
that's really the overall, there's different facets of it,
Oh, yeah.
but it's like, don't just face your fears. I say you do face them, but you grasp and acknowledge what the root of it is.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you walk through forgiveness to learn how to, what that transformation and how to live with that change to be live set free in Christ.
Right. Right. So the
Yeah.
healing can take place of the
Yeah.
being,
Mhm.
that's the one with God, and that has to heal to have that relationship with him.
Yeah. And so that's called, and through the community from the coaches, they are tremendous because I think with coaching, you need that
You got to have the
accountability.
lifetime connection.
Yeah. And I'm still
Yeah.
now I'm just starting out,
Mhm.
my business, and want
Mhm.
others to know I am here to help them
Mm.
to unlock what their God-given purpose and calling is, living confidently based on biblical led strategies because I'm unapologetically faith-based.
Yes.
And
Same here, girl. Same here.
yeah, I
And we
just
need more standing in that firmly, because we don't need to skirt around it. Like I say again, surface. We need to dig in.
yeah,
We need to dig in and bring people closer to God more than ever now.
yeah.
Um, and thank you for your story today. I know that it'll impact others. Um, I will put your things in the show note, all the things that you're about, your book. You do have that. I saw it on Amazon. We'll put that in, make sure people can link to that. I love to sit and shuffle through some scripture cards that I have here.
Mhm.
And whatever wound up on top is our scripture for today. And it says, "You will live secure and full of hope. God will protect you and give you rest." Job 11:18.
Oh, I
So in
love
him
that.
we live secure. That's huge. Definitely a blessing to hear that. But I just appreciate you so much for coming on my show today.
Well, thank you for having me, Laura. I appreciate it. And because like you said, I'm here like you to help others.
Mm,
And I just reach out, reach out to me. I'm here
yes.
no matter what it is.
Right.
Because,
There's a lot out there that need what you're offering because there's so many that in our age, I'm 62. I don't know about you, but that age bracket of people that are realizing how they lived in that people pleasing era, or maybe that in the unforgiveness era. They need to know that there is
yeah,
forgiveness and they can get past that, even in this age. They don't
yeah,
have to think, "Oh, I'm too old now. I'll just live with it." No, you
right.
can
Or if
come out
you're
of that.
embracing that change or need of transformation,
Mhm.
I've made that big decision with God's help.
Mhm.
And that was the huge decision.
Right,
One of the
right.
most life
And
altering.
taking the step to have a coach.
Yeah.
I have 2. I mean, it's important to have coaching.
Mhm.
I believe in getting, in the word and in him, but having that leadership from someone that is in his word also, not just anybody,
Mhm.
that also knows that walk and can help lead you and help you is so important.
Yeah. God first, but embody yourself and get yourself surrounded by the
Hmm.
right
The
community.
right
And
people.
that can be even online,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
get
yeah.
involved
A
with your
lot of that
church.
now since 2020, believe me.
Oh, yes.
Yes, yeah,
But
it
it's
opened our
wonderful.
doors to a lot of things. Well, you have a blessed afternoon, and just thank you again.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
All have a story to share. Each story has purpose and makes an impact to you, the listener, creating a journey with passion and purpose. The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Please share with others and subscribe below.